I never thought I'd live to see the day when my own daughter would turn her back on her mother, the woman who carried her, raised her, and loved her through every storm life could throw at us, dismissed for the sake of a birthday party. When I tell people this story, they often look at me in disbelief. But it's true. On the day we buried my wife, my daughter Emily was at her husband's celebration, clinking glasses and posing for pictures. The next morning, she walked through my front door smiling, holding a plate of cookies like nothing had happened. She kissed my cheek, called me Dad in that sweet tone she's always used when she wanted something, and sat across from me at the kitchen table. I thought maybe, just maybe, she had come to apologize. Instead, she leaned forward, folded her hands together, and asked for something I couldn't believe she had the nerve to request. That moment, right there, was when I took the last step she never saw coming. But before I tell you what I did, you need to know who we are. My name is John Carter, and I've just turned 56. For most of my adult life, I was a husband to the kindest woman I've ever known, Linda Carter. She wasn't just my wife. She was my anchor. We built a life together, raised a daughter, survived hardships, and celebrated small victories that felt larger than life when we had each other. Linda had a laugh that filled a room and a patience that carried me through my darkest days. When she passed away, it felt like half of me was lowered into the ground with her. And then there's my daughter, Emily Carter. She's 29 now, married to a man named Mark Daniels. Growing up, Emily was the light of our lives. Linda used to say Emily had fire in her spirit and love in her heart. She was the kind of girl who would make handmade cards for me on Father's Day, who would sit up late at night talking about her dreams of becoming a teacher, who hugged her mother every morning before leaving for school. But something shifted after she met Mark. At first, we thought he was just another charming boyfriend. He had a smile that could sell anyone a dream and a confidence that made you feel small if you weren't careful. Over time, Emily started bending herself around his world. She skipped Sunday dinners because he didn't like small talk. She brushed off family gatherings because his friends had better plans. And slowly, almost without realizing it, we began to lose her. Still, I never imagined she'd abandon her mother's funeral. The day Linda died, I called Emily in tears. I told her the arrangements, told her how much it would mean to me, how much it would mean to her mother, to see her standing by my side. And what did she say? She said, "Dad, Mark's birthday falls on the same day. We've had this planned for months. I can't just cancel everything. You'll have plenty of support there." Plenty of support? I didn't need plenty. Needed her. Linda needed her. When I lowered Linda's coffin into the ground, I looked around at the faces of family and friends. My brother was there. My cousins came from out of state. Neighbors who had known Linda for 30 years stood with tears in their eyes. But my daughter, the one person who should have been there more than anyone else, wasn't. She was across town, laughing at a party, raising a toast to her husband's birthday. So when she showed up at my door the next morning, smiling like nothing was wrong, I felt a surge of emotions I can hardly describe. Anger, hurt, betrayal, and under it all, an aching sadness that this was the child Linda and I had raised with so much love. She walked in with confidence like she had every right to be there. "Morning, Dad," she said, kissing my cheek. "I brought your favorite chocolate chip cookies." I thought you could use some cheering up, cheering up. I sat across from her at the table, the kitchen still smelling faintly of Linda's favorite lavender cleaner. For a moment, I stared at Emily, wondering if she could see the storm behind my eyes. I thought maybe she had come to make amends. Maybe she had finally realized the gravity of what she had done. But no. After a few pleasantries, she folded her hands and smiled that practiced smile. "Dad," she said softly, "Mark and I are getting ready to buy a house. We've found the perfect place, but we're short on the down payment. I was hoping you could help us out." And just like that, my world shifted again. My daughter, who had chosen a birthday over her mother's funeral, now sat across from me asking for money. That was the moment I made my choice, the last step she never expected. Before I tell you what happened after Emily came to me that morning, I need to take you back to the life I had with my wife, Linda, and the family we built together. To really understand the weight of what Emily did, you have to know what she meant to us and what Linda meant to me. Linda and I met when I was just 19 years old. She was working part-time at a diner in our hometown, pouring coffee with that easy smile she carried everywhere. I remember thinking right then and there that I didn't want to drink coffee from anyone else for the rest of my life. It took me weeks to gather the courage to ask her out, but when I finally did, she laughed and said, "I thought you'd never ask." We built our life the old-fashioned way, with hard work, shared dreams, and the belief that love meant sacrifice. I worked construction jobs, sometimes double shifts, while Linda went to nursing school. When Emily was born, Linda left her career behind to raise her, never once complaining. She always said being a mother was the most important job she could ever have. And let me tell you, she was good at it. Our home wasn't fancy, but it was warm. Linda made sure of that. Sunday dinners were sacred: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and her apple pie. She'd hum old country songs in the kitchen while Emily helped set the table, and I'd watch them from the doorway, feeling like the luckiest man alive. Those were the moments that stitched our family together. Emily was our only child. From the moment she came into the world, she had both of us wrapped around her little finger. Linda doted on her, and I wasn't much better. When Emily was 5, she dressed me up in a pink tutu and plastic crown for her fairy tea party. I sat in that outfit for an hour, sipping pretend tea, because the look on her face when she laughed was worth every second of embarrassment. As she grew older, Emily became Linda's shadow. They gardened together in the backyard, baked cookies for the neighbors at Christmas, and spent hours talking about life. Emily used to come into our bedroom at night, curl up next to her mother, and whisper about the boys she liked or the teachers she didn't. Linda was her safe place, her guide, her constant. And me? I was her rock. I was the one she called when she had a flat tire, the one she cried to when a boy broke her heart, the one who walked her to school the first day of kindergarten and stood at the back of the gym clapping when she graduated high school. She used to squeeze my hand and say, "You'll always be my hero, Dad." So, you see, when Linda got sick, our world began to crack. It started slowly, just fatigue at first, then doctor's visits, then tests that led to words no one wants to hear: late-stage cancer. For months, Linda fought with a quiet strength that humbled everyone around her. She never once complained about the treatments, the pain, or the indignities that illness can bring. Instead, she worried about me, about Emily, about how we'd go on without her. Emily visited in the beginning, holding her mother's hand, brushing her hair back gently, whispering that everything would be okay. But as Linda's health declined, Emily's visits became less frequent. She always had an excuse: work, friends, or something Mark needed. Linda never criticized her. She always said, "She's busy, John. She's young, don't be too hard on her." But I noticed the way Linda's eyes lingered on the door every time she heard a car outside, hoping it was Emily coming to see her. I noticed the way Linda's voice softened when she asked, "Did Emily call today?" And I noticed the disappointment when I shook my head. When Linda passed away, it felt like my entire world collapsed. Standing in that quiet hospital room, holding her hand as the machines fell silent, I realized that everything I had built for 37 years was gone in an instant. I was left with memories, an empty house, and a daughter who was supposed to be my lifeline through grief. That's what made her absence at the funeral cut so deep. The funeral wasn't just a ceremony, it was closure. It was a chance to honor Linda's life, to gather as a family, to say goodbye together. I needed Emily there, not just as my daughter, but as Linda's daughter. I needed her to stand with me, to prove that the love we built in our home still mattered. But instead, I stood alone. My wife was gone, and my daughter, the one who once called me her hero, wasn't by my side. She was at a party, blowing out candles for her husband, while I was lowering her mother into the ground. That's the picture you need to see. That's the weight I carried when Emily showed up the next morning, smiling, pretending nothing had happened. And that's why her request wasn't just shocking, it was unforgivable. Grief has a way of sharpening every wound. When Linda passed, I thought nothing could hurt worse than losing her. But I was wrong. What cut me deeper was watching my own daughter turn away at the very moment I needed her most. The funeral was held on a quiet Saturday morning. The church smelled faintly of lilies, the same flowers Linda loved to plant in the spring. Family and friends filled the pews, their heads bowed, their faces wet with tears. My brother Daniel clasped my shoulder, whispering, "Stay strong, John." But when I scanned the crowd for my daughter, I saw only an empty space where she should have been. That emptiness screamed louder than any sob. Instead of mourning her mother, Emily was across town at a restaurant with balloons and music, celebrating her husband Mark's birthday. I knew this because my niece showed me pictures later. Emily, laughing with a glass of champagne, her arm around Mark, not a hint of sorrow in her face. I remember gripping the side of the pew so hard my knuckles turned white. Part of me wanted to storm out of that church, drive across town, and drag her there myself. But what good would that have done? Linda deserved peace, not a spectacle. So I buried my anger that day, along with my wife. Still, the betrayal clung to me like smoke. The night after the funeral, I sat alone at the kitchen table. Linda's lavender candle burned faintly in the corner, and her picture smiled back at me from the mantel. I poured myself a glass of bourbon and stared at my phone, scrolling through the messages I'd exchanged with Emily just days before. Me. Emily, the service will be at 10 a.m. on Saturday. I need you there, Emily. Dad, it's Mark's birthday. We already planned a big dinner. I can't cancel everything. You'll have plenty of people there, right? Me. This isn't about plenty. This is about family. Emily. Dad, please understand. I'll come see you afterward, I promise. Reading those words over and over, I felt a mix of rage and sorrow I can hardly describe. My daughter had reduced her mother's funeral to an inconvenience. The very next morning, as promised, she showed up at my door. "Morning, Dad," she said brightly, walking in as if she had nothing to atone for. She carried a plate of cookies, her mother's recipe ironically, and set them on the counter. "I thought you might like these. Mark and I made them last night." The audacity of it nearly knocked the breath out of me. I wanted to shout at her, to ask how she could even look me in the eye after what she'd done, but I didn't. I let her sit at the table, I poured her a cup of coffee, and I waited. After a few pleasantries, how was the service, how was I holding up, she finally got to what she had really come for. "Dad," she said softly, resting her hands on mine, "Mark and I are looking at houses. We found one we love, but we're a little short on the down payment. We were hoping you could help us out." I pulled my hands back as though burned. My chest tightened, and I could feel the heat rising in my face. I stared at her, searching for any sign of guilt, any flicker of shame. But there was none. She smiled, almost smugly, as though she knew I'd say yes because I always had before. That was the moment the conflict between us became undeniable. This wasn't just about money, it was about respect. It was about honor. It was about the memory of Linda, who had given her whole life to raising this girl. And Emily, our daughter, had tossed that memory aside like yesterday's news, only to show up at my door asking for a check. My mind raced. Part of me wanted to scream, "How dare you! You couldn't bother to show up for your mother, but you can show up with your hand out?" But another part of me, the quieter, colder part, began to form a different thought. Maybe this was the moment to stop enabling her. For years, Linda and I had shielded Emily from consequences. We forgave missed calls, shrugged off canceled dinners, excused her selfishness because we loved her. But what she did now was different. It wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't youthful distraction. It was a choice. A deliberate choice to put a party above her family, above her mother's final farewell. As Emily sipped her coffee and chatted about floor plans and neighborhoods, I sat there in silence, nodding occasionally, my mind turning like gears in a machine. She thought she was building a case for my support, but what she was really doing was driving the final nail into the coffin of my patience. That was the conflict. A father torn between his love for his daughter and his loyalty to his wife's memory. A man caught between giving in, as he always had, or finally drawing a line in the sand. And in that moment, as Emily smiled across the table, completely unaware, I knew the choice I would make. When Emily finished her request, she looked at me with that familiar confidence I'd seen all my life. It was the look she gave me when she asked for money to fix her first car, or when she wanted help covering college tuition, or even when she and Mark needed a boost for their wedding. And each time I had said yes. I was her father, and fathers provide. But this time, something inside me broke. As she sat across from me in the kitchen, sipping coffee like nothing had happened, I felt Linda's absence press down heavier than ever. The chair beside me, the one where Linda always sat during our morning coffee, was empty. And in that silence, I swear I could almost hear her voice. "John," she used to say whenever we argued about how much we spoiled Emily, "don't forget. Our job isn't just to protect her, it's to teach her. If we don't, who will?" For years, I had brushed that off. I figured life would teach Emily soon enough. But now, sitting there with her smiling at me, I realized life had taught her the wrong lessons. She believed she could always lean on me, no matter how much she took for granted. She believed there would never be a line she couldn't cross. And Linda's words echoed in my mind. Don't let her forget where she comes from. So I made my choice. I didn't show my anger, I didn't slam my fist on the table or yell like my gut told me to. Instead, I kept my voice calm. "I'll think about it," I told her, watching her face light up as though she had already won. She kissed me on the cheek, thanked me, and left with a bounce in her step. She thought she had me wrapped around her finger again, but the truth was, I'd already decided. That night, I sat at Linda's old writing desk, the same one where she used to pay bills, write grocery lists, and tuck away little notes for me to find later. I pulled out the checkbook, opened it, and stared at the blank line where Emily thought her name would go. Instead, I closed it, slid it back in the drawer, and reached for a different folder. It was the folder Linda had kept with documents for the hospice that cared for her in her final months. Receipts, donation forms, thank you letters from the staff who had adored her. Linda had said more than once, "If we ever come into extra money, promise me we'll give back to them." They gave me dignity when I had none left, so I made good on that promise. I called the hospice the next day and asked about making a donation in Linda's name. They told me about a fund they were setting up to help families who couldn't afford care, and I knew immediately what I needed to do. I wrote the check for the exact amount Emily had asked me for. Only instead of funding her new house, it would go toward helping strangers find comfort in their darkest hours, just like Linda had. For the first time since Linda's death, I felt a sense of peace. But peace didn't erase the storm building inside me. Because now came the harder part, telling Emily. Over the next few days, she texted me little reminders. "Dad, don't forget to look at the numbers. Mark's so excited about the house. Thank you for considering. I know Mom would want you to support us." That last message stung like a knife. Using her mother's memory as leverage when she hadn't even shown up to the funeral, that was the final insult. I didn't reply. I let her stew in. Silence. Inside, though, I was preparing. I thought carefully about what I would say, how I would say it. I rehearsed the words in my head late at night while sitting alone in the living room. This wasn't just about denying her request, It was about making her understand why. It was about drawing the line I should have drawn years ago. I could almost picture Linda watching me, nodding in approval as I practiced. "Be firm, John," I imagined her saying, "but don't be cruel. She's still our daughter. She just needs to learn." So I waited until Emily called, her tone impatient. "Dad, can I come by tomorrow? I really need to know if you're going to help us. We're ready to make an offer." "Yes," I told her. "Come by. We'll talk." When I hung up the phone, I felt the weight of my decision settle on my shoulders. Tomorrow would change everything between us. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of that. Because this wasn't just about saying no, it was about honoring Linda, about standing up for what was right, and about showing Emily that love sometimes means refusing the easy path. The turning point had come. I was no longer the father who always said yes. Tomorrow, Emily would find out just how far my love would go and just how far it wouldn't. The next afternoon, Emily arrived at my house right on time. She pulled up in that shiny SUV Mark had insisted on leasing, the kind that costs more each month than most people's mortgages. She walked up the front steps confidently, phone in one hand, coffee in the other, like this was just another casual visit to her father. I opened the door before she could knock. "Dad," she said brightly, leaning in to hug me. "I've been thinking about that house all week. I'm so glad you took some time to look things over. You always know what's best." Her words dripped with charm, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. She wasn't here to connect. She was here to collect. We sat down at the kitchen table, the same spot where she had made her request days earlier. The morning light streamed through the window, casting long shadows across Linda's old lace tablecloth. For a moment, I just looked at Emily, my daughter, my only child, and felt the ache of everything we'd lost between us. She mistook my silence for hesitation and leaned forward eagerly. "So," she said, "did you decide?" "Because Mark's already spoken to the realtor, and if we can move fast, we won't lose it." I folded my hands on the table, steadying myself. "Yes, Emily." I made a decision. Her face lit up instantly. "I knew you would. You've always believed in me. I told Mark you'd come through. I'll pay you back as soon as I can, of course." I took a deep breath. "You won't be paying me back, Emily, because I'm not giving you a dime." The smile froze on her face. "What? Dad, I don't understand. I mean exactly what I said." My voice was calm, measured. "You asked me for money after skipping your mother's funeral. You chose a party over her memory, over me, over the family that raised you. And now you want me to reward that choice by helping you buy a bigger house?" "Number. The answer is no." Her mouth fell open, disbelief flashing across her face. "Dad, that's not fair. You know how much was riding on that night. Mark's friends, his business connections. It wasn't just a party." I slammed my palm on the table, harder than I intended. The sound echoed through the kitchen. "It was your mother's funeral, Emily. The woman who gave you life. The woman who stayed up with you when you were sick. Who sacrificed everything for you. And you couldn't be bothered to show up. Don't you dare stand there and tell me a party mattered more than her." Tears welled in her eyes, but her tone turned sharp. "So what? You're just going to cut me off? After everything you've done for me all my life? After all the times you told me I could count on you?" I leaned in close, my voice dropping to a low, steady growl. "You can always count on me to tell you the truth. And the truth is, I am done enabling you. For once, you need to face the consequences of your choices." She stared at me, trembling, as though she didn't recognize the man in front of her. Finally, I told her the part she never saw coming. "You want to know what I did with the money? I donated it, every penny, to the hospice that cared for your mother, in her name, because she deserved honor, not neglect. She deserved remembrance, not your excuses." Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. You gave it away? To strangers?" To people who need it, I said firmly. To families who are sitting where we sat, watching someone they love fade away. To nurses who held your mother's hand when you weren't there. That's where the money went. Because Linda earned it. You didn't. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily's tears spilled freely now, but they weren't the tears of a grieving daughter. They were the tears of someone who had just realized the safety net was gone. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping across the floor. "I can't believe you would do this to me," she snapped. "To your own daughter." I rose slowly, meeting her eye. "No, Emily. You did this to yourself. I love you more than life, but I won't let you dishonor your mother's memory. Not in my house. Not with my help." For a long moment we just stood there, father and daughter, staring across the gulf that had opened between us. Then she turned, stormed out the door, and slammed it behind her. I watched from the window as she climbed into her SUV, wiped her face angrily, and sped away. The house was silent again, except for the faint creak of Linda's rocking chair in the living room. I walked over, sat down, and let the weight of what had just happened sink in. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. But for the first time since Linda's death, I felt like I had honored her. I had protected her memory. And I knew, deep down, that my daughter would never forget what I had done. When the front door slammed behind Emily that day, the sound reverberated through the house like a thunderclap. For a long while, I just sat in Linda's rocking chair, staring at the floor, letting the silence settle in. The confrontation had left me drained. Like every ounce of strength I'd been clinging to since Linda's passing had been poured out in those few minutes at the kitchen table. And yet, beneath the exhaustion, I felt something unexpected. Peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that comes from everything being okay. Nothing was okay. My wife was gone, my daughter was angry with me, and my family felt fractured. But it was the peace of knowing I had done the right thing, the hard thing. I had finally drawn the line I should have drawn years ago. For days after, Emily didn't call. She didn't text. She didn't show up at my door with cookies or sweet words. Part of me worried I had lost her forever, that she would dig her heels into anger and cut me off completely. But another part of me knew that sometimes love means risking rejection in order to save someone from themselves. At night, I found myself talking to Linda the way I used to when she was alive. I'd sit at the edge of the bed staring at her picture on the nightstand and whisper, "I hope I did the right thing. I hope she'll understand one day." In my heart, I imagined Linda's gentle hand on mine, her soft voice telling me, "You did, John." You finally made her see. A week later, I received a letter in the mail from the hospice. It was a thank you note for the donation I had made in Linda's name. They wrote about how the money would help cover care for 3 families who couldn't afford it, how it would pay for medication, meals, and counseling. At the bottom, the director had handwritten a line. "Your wife's legacy lives on through your generosity." She must have been a remarkable woman. Reading that, I felt tears sting my eyes. Linda's legacy was not the money, but the values she had stood for: compassion, dignity, and selflessness. That was what I wanted Emily to remember. That was what I refused to let her bury under excuses and entitlement. A few days after the letter arrived, Emily finally called. Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Dad," she said quietly, "can I come over?" When she walked through the door, her face was blotchy from crying. She sat at the same kitchen table where our argument had happened, but this time she didn't come with demands. She came with questions. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "Why give the money away when you knew how much I needed it?" I leaned forward, my hands folded on the table. "Because, Emily, your mother deserved more than what you gave her. She deserved your presence, your respect, your love, and you chose not to give it. You asked me for money when you hadn't even given her your time. I couldn't let you walk away thinking that was acceptable." She broke down then, sobbing into her hands. For the first time, I saw not the defiant woman married to Mark, but the little girl who used to curl up next to her mother at night, whispering secrets. "I messed up," she choked out. I thought I could make it up to you later. I didn't realize how badly I'd hurt you, how badly I'd hurt Mom." I reached across the table, resting my hand on hers. "It's not too late to make it right. But it starts with remembering who you are and who raised you. Your mother gave everything for you. Don't let her memory be overshadowed by excuses. It wasn't forgiveness in an instant. Healing never is. But it was the start of something." In the weeks that followed, Emily came by more often. Sometimes she just sat in silence with me. Sometimes she asked about stories from my marriage with Linda, and sometimes she stood with me at the gravesite, tears in her eyes, whispering apologies I knew Linda would have already forgiven. Mark didn't come around much after that. Maybe he was embarrassed, maybe he just didn't care. But Emily slowly began to see the cracks in the life she had been building with him. And though I never told her what choices to make, I could see her beginning to rediscover the values she had once lived by. The last step I took, the step she never expected, wasn't about punishing her. It was about saving her. About reminding her that love isn't a blank check, and family isn't a convenience. It's a responsibility, a bond, a legacy that outlives us. As I stood at Linda's grave one crisp morning, placing fresh lilies in the soil, I whispered, "I kept my promise, Linda." She remembers now, maybe not fully, maybe not perfectly, but she's finding her way back. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a brief moment I could almost hear Linda's laughter. That was the lesson. That was the conclusion I had come to. Sometimes the hardest no a parent can give is the most loving thing of all. And though my daughter may have walked away angry that day, she walked back later with humility. And that was worth more than any house, any money, any comfort I could have bought her. Because in the end, love is not about giving everything. It's about giving the right things. Truth, accountability, and a legacy worth carrying. And that's my story. A story about love, loss, betrayal, and the hardest decision I've ever had to make as a father. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Sometimes the greatest act of love is not giving in, but standing firm. Because that's the only way the people we love can truly grow. If this story touched you, if it made you feel something, anger, sadness, or even hope, then do me a favor. Like this video so more people can hear it. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of family and the strength of saying no. And most importantly, leave a comment below. Tell me what you would have done in my shoes. Did I make the right choice, or was there another path I should have taken? I read every single one of your comments, and your thoughts matter. And if you want more stories like this, raw, real, and filled with the lessons life doesn't always teach gently, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way, you'll never miss the next one. Thank you for listening. And remember, honor those you love while you still have the chance.